A warm good evening, one and all. We take great pleasure in welcoming you yet again for a session with the Madras Canadian Club. Today, we are very happy to have with us Mr. Miller, aka Judge David LaPlanche. So, Mr. Miller needs no introduction. He's been an AKC judge. He has judged in India earlier. He's a sight owned specialist. So, he has bred Salukis under the prefix of Chandel, coupled with the French Saluki kennel, Arab Bahari, and he occasionally breeds and uh, shows the breed even till today. In addition, he has also owned Afghan hounds, Dalmatians, and Italian Greyhounds. In 1988, Mr. Miller had applied for the American Kennel Club for the judging license for Salukis. Since then, he is approved to judge the Hound Group, the Non-Sporting Group, the Sporting Group, Toy Group, Dobermans, Dandy Dinmont Terriers, Glen-of-Amal Terriers, Norfolk Terriers, Norwich Terriers, Dryads, Pyrenean Shepherds, and Cardigan Welsh Corgis. Mr. Miller is well traveled. He has visited more than 32 countries. I didn't want to read out the countries, it's going to be a huge list. So he's literally traveled all around the world judging, and he's also done a lot of travel to North Africa, where he's given multiple seminars on breeds like Afghan hounds, Asawaks, Flubis. So in the mid 70s and throughout the 80s, Mr. Miller had showed not only Salukis but a lot of dogs to several other clients. So a warm welcome once again, Mr. Miller. So we will start off with the show, and we'll start off with the usual question that we ask our guests. So why did you
Okay.
get? How did you get associated with the Salukis? There are so many other breeds in the pedigree dog world. So why
Well,
Salukis?
it happened many years ago. It happened in the 1970s. I was going to school in France,
Okay.
and I saw my first Saluki, and I fell in love. And I said, "These are dogs." And this was a time where I was very thin and svelte, and they were very thin and svelte. So there was a quick association right there. And when I got back to the United States, I actually one of my employers bought me an Afghan hound. And I acquired two more, and I started showing Afghans first, but then afterwards I went into Salukis, and that followed the course of my life.
Okay, that's lovely. So let's get kick started with our set of questions for the day. So Siddharth, can you start off with the questions? Okay. So we have the first question. So what is the origin of the Hounds? Is there any specific or particular breed that they have descended from? Is there a common ancestral dog or
You
breed?
know, that is a very, very interesting question, and actually, no one has an answer for it.
Okay.
Now, if I was a professor going up and lecturing, I would give you the answer that sight hounds, also known as hounds or gaze hounds or Windhunds, are breeds that primarily hunt by sight instead of scent. And all sighthound breeds are an ancient type of dog dating back to the great Egyptian, Middle Eastern, African, and Southwest Asian cultures. Well, that's good and fine, but this is something that we have been fed for many, many years. And there are things happening now because advancements in technology, archaeology, so on and so forth, that are leading us to a little bit different conclusions. I have been in conversations with Annette Roed Bundgaard from Denmark. She is a archaeologist and deals with canine archaeology.
Okay.
And she basically tells me, okay, David, we are just scraping the surface of understanding where the origin of sighthounds are. Other things that have happened as well is that I was in a very historical meeting in China regarding what was called at that time the Zigu, or now it's called the Xian Hound. And along with the CKU, the China Kennel Union, and Frankie Lung, we had the first grouping of about 28 Xian hounds that I started taking notes on. And I we always think that sometimes that we have hounds coming from the west going to the east. But when you take a look at these dogs, you think, oh, well, that could be a little bit different because they could have come from the east because Xi'an, the city, was the furthest eastern trading point in the Silk Route. And so therefore, these dogs I'm looking at, I'm saying, okay, I see Afghan, I see Pharaoh, I see lots of different sight hound breeds within this one breed. I see Azwak in them. And I'm wondering, well, if they have all of these characteristics, then we may want to think these things. But again, this is all conjecture. We will never know until the National Institute of Health has a section in it that deals with dogs here, and they're completing the dog genome. And just yesterday, I received from Erica Wyatt. Now, Erica is a lady. She's an attorney. She lives up in the Illinois area, Chicago area. Mm-hmm. And she was just in a video conference with the NIH, the National Institute of Health, and he found out that she believes, and they believe, that these dogs, sighthounds, and especially Shigu, are distant relatives of the Saluki.
Okay.
Well, that fires more and more conjecture. Where do these dogs come from? What's happening? Now, I'd like to go to that article that I wrote for that up on the screen, and hopefully I'll be able to read it while we're looking at it. Okay. Taking a look at it, can we enlarge that picture at all?
Yeah, we'll do that. So that, can you just zoom it a bit, the Word document? Yeah.
Okay, let me go down. I'm going to read the article to everybody to let everybody know exactly where I'm coming from. And again, this is conjecture, but it's logical at the same time, because when you're looking at the Silk Route, when you're looking at the transportation of dogs, hounds in particular, you see that when they traded along the Silk Route, because they just didn't go to one city at all, and one very, very good book to read is this book. It's called Sven Hayden. He was a researcher, and he has a book called The Silk Route. And very, very interesting book, but they stopped and they bartered. And they obviously bartered in dogs as well. And what happened was the dogs that attracted the people in that area, people got, and they interbred to, number one, for climate reasons, number two, for hunting reasons, because dogs were utility dogs. They were very useful. They're used for hunting, to put food on the table, so on and so forth. So dogs evolved. Hounds evolved, and we just don't know where the origin evolved. However, we know that they evolved. For example, look at India with their Indian native breeds. And I know you're going to be coming to that question probably, but
very much.
they were localized, they bartered, and they were part of that Silk Route road. So I'm going to say that dogs have been reported to have been domesticated over 40,000 years ago. When you look at Nordic breeds, when you look at Siberian Huskies, their history goes back, 40,000, 50,000 years ago. In the past 2,500 years, around 457 BC in Xi'an, China, the eastern terminus of the Silk Route, lived a hound of remarkable features. As conjecture stimulates, and I say conjecture because I don't want people believing fully until we have furnished evidence. that lived a hound of remarkable features. As conjecture stimulates the imagination, this hound could be the principal ancestor of the sighthounds which we officially recognize today. It could be. On April 8, 2017, a historic mission in Xi'an itself was initiated to register, document, physically microchip, and collect blood samples for DNA research on several specimens of this ancient breed from local fanciers. This is the first time in several thousand years such a comprehensive attempt, and I use the word comprehensive here because we have a most famous person that has collected samples in China. The National Institute of Health only has about 4 or 5, I believe, buccal specimens of this by Sir Terence Clark. And Sir Terence Clark, by far, is one of the principal people to turn to when you're discussing sighthounds in general. So the comprehensive attempt was made to research this breed under the auspices of a credible canine governing authority. The event was sponsored by the China Kennel Union. This initiative was the brainstorm of the CKU visionary, Mr. Frankie Loon, aided by Ms. Grace Wang from the Beijing office of the CKU. Mr. John So and me, 21 Xi'an Hounds. The historic mission is foreshadowed by other noteworthy studies by Xi'an Hound enthusiasts whose mission was to introduce these hounds to the West. Dr. Hansul Ismail Heshmail from Malaysia several years prior made overtures to bring this breed to light by documenting, filming, and collecting buccal samples as well for further studies through several trips to the area of origin of these hounds. Also, Dr. Hishmael has also been to India many times too to look at Indian breeds. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, Sir Terence Clark, who I just mentioned previously, the former British diplomat and world-renowned hound specialist, set his sights upon these curious hounds. Currently, there's a Facebook page, the Xi'an Hound, which is administered by Chinese individuals who are willing to constructively present, discuss, serve, and protect this indigenous Chinese breed. The administrators of the above Facebook page are experienced owners of the breed, such as Li Guangxi, also with their father, Li Yi, have bred and raised these hounds for over 35 years. Mr. Li is well an administrator who will oversee the registration and various other aspects of the preservation of the breed. A great appreciation goes out to these individuals on whom we shall rely and document their knowledge and experience. Very, very important, because this is an indigenous Chinese breed, and we're learning more and more about Chinese breeds that we've never heard of before. And since China has opened up, we're going to be hearing more and more. And since history is being proven and furnished to us by China, by archaeologists, so on and so forth, we could definitely make an earthquake, an upheaval of our prior knowledge of hounds. So I realize that this hound fulfills the image of a startling conglomerate of many breeds. While viewing this, a belief which so many before me have pondered comes to mind. Along the Silk Route, did dogs move eastward, or do they originate in the east and travel westward? Much DNA analysis and work on the canine genetic genome needs to be completed before the full picture is discovered through viable scientific research. In hounds in general, we are fed fairy tales. And a lot of hounds and Salukis, you're told this and that, and so on and so forth. And you know, when you enter the breed, you buy this story or fairy tale until you start thinking maybe things could be a little bit different. So we have to rely on scientific research. I am no expert on the Xi'an Hound. My introduction to the breed originated in the early 1990s while engrossed in the French sighthound book Le Destin de l'Ouvrier. by Xavier Podolsky. So very few experts exist on this breed. Therefore, we all collectively, students of this breed, which will emerge more and more on the canine scene. Plans have been initiated to bring this breed to the United States. So what is the Xian Hound? Primarily on the surface is an ancient Chinese dolichocephalic dog. Its documented history dates back to the Tang Dynasty, approximately in 685 AD.
Okay.
Very old. The breed has retained its hunting attributes since the majority of the owners use them as a functional dog in China on their farms and lands in the secluded countryside. And this was a feat for Frankie Loom to do, to assemble these people, to convince these people, come, we want to preserve your breed. We want to make the breed known. This is part of China. This is part of our culture. And that's very, very important with hounds because hounds follow their culture. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. They have defined sturdy running gear and compact feet, toes close together to navigate the terrain on which they hunt. Their expression seems quizzical, and they assess people and situations on their own terms, a cornerstone of many hound breed temperaments. Their high ear sets frame their head when alert to accentuate their dynastic, regal appearance. They are essentially built to hunt with moderate, well-set under-angulation. Very interesting word, moderate. Front and rear to cover ground. What sets them apart from other hound breeds is their extraordinary flexible spinal column, which aids in the hunt for the purposes of leaping and turning to overrun their prey. More than any sight hound I have witnessed, they are more flexible in their spinal column. And you see the chart that I've made, and this was just a very simple chart because I had to do this article very quick for Alan Resnick's Dogs in Review magazine. And I did some parallels between the breeds, some of the sighthound breeds, to the Sigu, in order to show that I'm seeing all these traits, I'm seeing all these attributes. This is mind-boggling. Can we go down further?
Very good.
And then I have this footnote here. It says, please note and review the similarities of the Xian Hound to the Indian breeds, such as the Murul Hound, Caravan Hound, Pashmis, Chipai, Rampur Hound, Kani, and the Rajapaliyam. And excuse me if I don't pronounce them correctly, but all along the silk route, and silk was not the sole commodity. Dogs were too. So we go a little bit further. And we're almost done with the article now. While commodities throughout the silk route were predominantly silk-oriented, many other trade items were bartered away. Dogs were one such commodity. As dogs were dispersed many years ago, some stopped and were developed to accommodate the terrain and hunting prerequisites beneficial to the needs of the inhabitants of that region. That's why we have many hound breeds. As for the Xian Hound, located in the most eastern part of this important trade route, skeletal representations curiously resemble dogs of many ages past, older than the documented reported dates of these, as Annette Rudgaard Olsen states. Now, this is the archaeologist I told you about in Denmark. A famed archaeologist specializing in the origins of the dog. We are at the tip of the iceberg in relationship to the Chinese hounds and the depth of their presence on the face of the earth. Very, very interesting. It's very interesting to learn more and more things to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Then I did a symposium with the breeders. They're translated by Frankie Loom. Of course, I don't speak Mandarin. And at that symposium, I told them all that this breed is bigger than all of us in this room. We need to define it slowly, steadily, to collectively preserve what millennia has bestowed upon us. No one individual has a monopoly over it. We all there's a French writer called Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, in a famous book called Le Petit Prince, said, "We are forever responsible for what we tame. So we are responsible for keeping these breeds pure." And as restraints of editing have imposed on this article, I cannot elaborate anymore on the piles of information, so on and so forth. So can we go up a little bit further?
Sure. Yes.
Or down a little bit further, I should say. To the next page.
I think that's
it. Okay. That's all we need to know about. Here, we have something throwing a wrench into what our preconceived knowledge may be on the origins of hounds. And that's all I can talk about on that one.
That's given a totally new flavor and a direction to see it for the sight hounds and their origins per se.
Yeah, it's eye-opening, and we still have a lot to learn. And I'm glad that you call me and I'm flattered that you call me a hound expert. But I'll tell you something: I am constantly learning every single day about hounds, about everything. And when you stop learning, I think you die.
That's a very nice thing to say, David. That's something I think which is reiterated time and again. Every time we do a session with an expert, that is the first thing that they say, that we are a constant learner. We keep learning. Learning is the one thing that is a continual process and doesn't end at one point in time. So I think that's the clue that everyone takes from this session, and keep learning. Be a student throughout your life. That is very important. So that's nice. So we'll move on to the next question. I think that's given us a lot of insight into the origin. So the next question is: there are many recognized sight hounds. Have you have seen a few of the Indian breeds while judging them? How close do they represent the overall sight hound silhouette?
Very, very close. There's no doubt in my mind when I take a look at the Moodle hound that it is a sight hound. Then you're taking a look at your Indian hounds, indigenous Indian hounds. Mm-hmm. You have the Chipipari. Is that how you pronounce it?
Chipipari.
And here we have a sight hound with a little bit of flyaway ears, and we have with some attributes of sight hounds, whereas the rear is a little bit higher than the withers. Well, what other hounds, sight hounds, have that? Sluggies, Oswak. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Can they be related? I'm sure they are. Okay, the Moodle hound. Now, this is very, very interesting because there's some conjecture on this. The Moodle hound breed of dogs are used for hunting and guarding in and around Moodhal, town of Karnataka.
In the state of Karnataka, right?
Okay. The breed is also known as the caravan hound. In the villages, he's known as the Kawani. And some people believe that the Moodle hound and the caravan hound are two separate breeds. Some people are convinced that they're one breed. That is for India to decide, and that India is going to have to decide on that one. The Rajapalyam is the first Indian sight hound I ever saw. Mm-hmm. I believe it was CV that brought the dogs, and if I may just delve into another area here, I've been to India 3 times. And it was my good friends, Lynn Watson and Peter Watson, that they were transferred to India, and they said to me, "David, you've got to come. You've got to come." And I said, "David, if you don't do it, you'll never do it." So I did. And fell in love. And then I went back to India several months later to stay with them, and then I was invited to judge in India, where I gave a seminar on solving the mysteries of breed time. And so, the Rajapalyam is from Tamil Nadu.
Correct.
which is not too far in Chennai, right?
Correct.
Right,
It is
exactly.
from a place called Rajapalayam in Tamil Nadu. In the state of Tamil Nadu, it is from a place called Rajapalayam. It is down south.
Exactly.
State.
And they're a large milk-colored, white-colored dog, native to the town of Rajapalayam. So, beautiful, beautiful dog. That's a purpose. Then you have the Kani. And when I looked at the Kani, I said, oh my, this looks like very much in some ways as a smooth Saluki. Well, where is it coming from? Is it coming from Xi'an, the Silk Route? Is it coming from Persia? I don't know. It's just conjecture. We will never know until we have the scientific proof. And you have the Rampur Greyhound, which is the noble greyhound, India's best-known dog bred native to the Rampur region of northern India. The Rampur Hound is one of the largest Indian dog with powerful built, strong jaws. Looks like a greyhound in some aspects, but a beautiful dog and completely Indian. And then you have other Indian breeds that are not really sight hounds, but are guard dogs, working dogs, so on and so forth. The question is, how close do they represent the overall sight hound silhouette? Very, very close.
Actually, as you said, most of the breeds do resemble the sight-hound silhouette very closely. There might be a little bit of aberrations, maybe with the Kombai or the Jananji, or maybe the Ramanathapuram Mandai not that we are talking about. So again, these are all healers.
And one thing I can remember when I judged them. I judged a quantity of, I think, Muru hounds in Chennai.
Correct.
And one thing I remember was, look at these dogs. These dogs are owned by people that usually use them
Very true.
to hunt.
Very true.
So sometimes in your mind, when you're judging them, you say to yourself, who would I take hunting with me? What dog has that punishing underjaw? What dog has the musculature that can go ahead and after that game? Because with a lot of hounds, and this is happening all over the world, they're breeding them to be too refined.
Mm-hmm.
It happens with Salukis. It happens with Afghan hounds. Their muzzles are getting too refined. They're lacking underjobs. The thing that you have to remember is this. They weren't bred to hunt grasshoppers. They're bred to hunt substantial game. So, these attributes are very, very important when you're looking at these Indian hounds because they're still used for a purpose. And that is very, very important.
That means
and you have her.
Wonderful. We'll move on to the next one. David. So there is one from Mr. Dhanraj Malik. So what are the most common similarities in all sight hounds?
Oh boy, common similarities in all sight hounds. Well, you have a head that does not have an abrupt stop.
Mm-hmm.
You have a back, usually, that has a slight arch over the loin in many of the sight hounds. And this is primarily for them to be able to turn quickly, navigate quickly, so on and so forth, in order to catch their prey.
Mm-hmm.
Their ear sets are normally high, except you have some ear sets like the Afghan hound, which is on level with the eye. So that can change. Sight hounds are a mixed bag. Some have short hair, some have long hair, but they have to be able to move and to move swiftly and gracefully and agilely in order to hunt.
I think that addresses Mr. Dhanraj's question. We'll go on to the next one. So, okay, this is something which we want to understand. Why is there a huge difference between the AKC Hound group and the FCA Sight Hound, that is Group 10?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. And I think the answer is it has to do with the classification system is different between AKC and FCI. FCI has the luxury of having 10. The USA, we only have 7 groups. So to keep the integrity of these 7 groups, we've put the scent hounds and sight hounds together.
Makes sense.
And we've made a list of the scent hounds, we've made a list of the sight hounds, and so on and so forth. This is a very tough question to really answer, simply because it has to do sometimes in the United States, because the AKC was thinking about going ahead and splitting the group.
Okay.
And it was met with a little bit of indifference by people,
Okay.
simply because, as show chairman, if we went ahead and split those groups, and it might not be cost effective for us to do that, simply because we might have to add more judges, so on and so forth. Who are we going to get to do the groups? So if we had our scent hound group and our sight hound group, so we were worried about that, because quite frankly, our dog world is ruled in part by money. We have to have the money to get the judges. We have to have the money to have enough rings, and so on and so forth. So taking a look at the American Sight Hound, or the American Hound Group, I should say, we have Group 4 in FCI. We have all the dachshunds.
Action separately, really.
And that is completely different in FCI than it is in the United States. In the United States, we only have 2 sizes. We have standard and miniature. And our standards, I think, are around 16 to 32 pounds. Our miniatures are about 11 pounds and under at 12 months of age.
Mhm.
FCI use standard, miniature, and rabbit dachshunds. And these are all classified by the circumference of their chest. You have the standard that has a chest of 35 centimeters, and they're up to 9 kilos. The miniatures 32, 35, and I think they're up to 15. No, they're 30 to 35 centimeters, and the rabbit dachshunds are about 30 centimeters, under 30 centimeters, up to 30 centimeters. So we do what we have in common is we have smooth-haired, wire-haired, and long-haired. So we have not only the dachshunds, and we would have 3 represented in our group: the smooth hair, wire hair, and long hair. Whereas in Group 4, I think you have 9 in FCI, and your Group 5, because everything in FCI is separated. Your Group 5, we have Spitz and primitive type breeds that are included into our
Hound group, as we said.
Hound group, right.
Arrow
and
hounds.
there are scent hounds and related breeds and so on and so forth. So it's a conglomerate of all these groups and that. So this is why we have what we have here in the United States. And a long time ago, it was set that way. The AKC did, in fact, several years ago, and this is when I first started showing dogs, had a huge working group.
Okay.
And they separated that because it was just incredible to have almost 40 dogs in a group.
So which groups did the dogs which are separated from the working groups move on to?
Well, so we're working judge. I think they separated a lot that were in the working group into the herding group.
Herding group. Makes sense. Okay. That's nice. Superb. I think we go to the next one, which is again a viewer question. There is one question from Mr. Radhakrishnan. Would you call Saluki the progenitor of all the sighthounds?
I'll have to see if I have a bodyguard near me to protect me while I answer this.
It's a very political question.
Sighthound people can be very definite in their ideas. My honest opinion.
Yes, we want your view as such. As you said, we can all.
This is just David Miller's opinion.
Yeah.
I would say a Saluki type dog may have been the progenitor of all sighthounds. But going back to what we were discussing before about the Xian Hound, and that I am leaning towards the fact that they may be the progenitor of all sighthounds. Again, we don't have the factual information. We've been fed the story that these dogs are indeed the progenitor, the oldest in the hound kingdom. But I think that myth is being disproved at the present moment. And I was brought up with the fact that they were, and everything was fine and so on and so forth, but I've got my doubts. And there's a famous French philosopher called Pierre Balle. He said, "Never take anything for granted." He said, "Always doubt." And I think we need to do this in this relationship.
Okay, you're talking about this DNA project that is going on with the Xian Hound, isn't it, David? So, what are the timelines you are expecting to have constructive or definitive results on them?
I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, I was asking about the DNA testing of the Xian Hounds. You're saying that the project is on. Is there a definite timeline by which you will have concrete answers?
Well, just yesterday, I sent a message to Frankie Lung in China. Mm-hmm. I said, Erica Wyatt, who was responsible for bringing sloogies into the United States, had talked with the NIH, the National Institute of Health, in regards to sloogies and so on and so forth. And they brought up the fact that the Xian Hound was distantly related to the Saluki, and they would need more samples fed to them. And Frankie Lung actually was very, very excited about this and wants to get these samples to them so they can make a more definitive analysis of the dog. And certainly we do have the ability to do this, and his relationship with the Chinese breeders can bring this about very quickly. So we may have an answer in a year.
Wonderful. That's a definitive timeline that we look forward to it. It'll be really great to know.
Yes.
Super. We go to the next one. So as a judge, what would attract you more? An elegant, graceful, moving Afghan hound or a well-twisted whippet?
Oh, wow. This is a really tough question, but I'm going to tell you something. I would go for an elegant, graceful, moving Afghan hound.
Wonderful.
I'll tell you why. I had an Afghan hound judge that many years ago I was mentored by. Her name was Kay Finch. Mm-hmm. And I asked her about a head. And she looked at me and she said something, and it always stuck with me. She says, "They don't run on their head, David." Well, they don't. And that is very, very important. A well-chiseled whippet, well, the well-chiseled whippet could be very fine. And when we're talking about chiseling, we're usually talking about the head. And we find that okay, fine, it could be very, very beautiful in the head, but the body is important too, because you're not looking at just one thing. You're looking at at many things on the dog. You're looking for balance, and especially in a sight hound, it needs to be balanced. So therefore, if the Afghan is moving elegantly and gracefully, sometimes, and I've always said this, especially people who have mentored under me, sometimes the truth is in the movement. So you have to look at the whole picture rather than one small thing.
Element association. Makes sense. Wonderful. Thanks for that answer, David. We'll move on to the next one.
I hope I didn't offend any whippet people here.
No, as I said, it's an individual opinion and we really want to understand. That's the reason we are coming up with all these questions. So the next one is, it is observed that most sight hounds have an innate shyness in them, despite being even well-showed show dogs from a young age. Even them, even those dogs, when it's a sight hound group, they have an innate shyness. Why is that?
Well, I think that's a generalization. And I think we're looking at temperament. And if we look at sight hound temperament, we have an Afghan hound that's supposed to be aloof and dignified. Mm-hmm. Well, can we take the word aloof and make it the same as shyness? I don't think so. They're kind of have a arrogance with them. Well, just looking at the other sight hounds, we're looking at the standards. The standards tell us the story because the standards are the blueprint. The standards are the blueprint of how the dog should be. The judges are the building inspector. So that's why we need a standard. And the standards usually go ahead and tell us about temperament. And there's specific breeds that if you have shyness, forget it, you do not award whatsoever. Dobermans are one example. Well, Borzois, in their standard, have no specification on temperament.
Okay.
But if you're around, and I'm only talking about the AKC standard right now, and I'll touch upon the FCI standard. But if you've been around Borzois, you know that they're kind of a gentle dog. And another thing, too, they can be big babies. Greyhounds, in their standard, no specification on temperament. Okay. But if you've been around Greyhounds, back. They're kind of docile. Irish Wolfhounds, there's no specified part of that standard that deals with temperament. They say they're active and so on and so forth, but nothing in the standards telling me. Pharaoh Hounds. Oh, Pharaoh Hounds are giving me a clue. Intelligent, friendly, affectionate, playful. Well, that's certainly different than an Afghan hound, is it? Aloof and dignified. Completely the opposite of an Afghan. A Saluki, no mention of temperament. But us Saluki owners know that they can be aloof. Very aloof. I can remember one time at a national specialty, I had a nice winning Saluki smooth bitch. And as the judge was going over her, she turned her head away from the judge as if he was nothing. And he looked at me and he said, boy, that is real Saluki temperament. So, in the Scottish Deerhound, there's no mention of temperament. Salukis, they say they're they have class, grace, noble, and somewhat aloof.
Okay.
Whippets, amiable, friendly, gentle, capable of great intensity when they want to see something and want to run after it, so on and so forth. So that's their temperament. But a lot of these hound standards don't have a section that talk about temperament. So we can't say that most sight hounds have an innate shyness in them, because that's not really true.
Okay, then so if, again reiterating, there are a lot of breeds in AKC, in other groups, let's assume the hound groups or the working group. where there's a very specific mention on temperaments. I breed boxers, I breed English Cocker Spaniels, so I understand what temperament is expected of
Oh,
a
yes, especially with English Cocker Spaniel.
English Cocker. You have the merry Cocker that needs to
Yes,
fly all over you.
no wag, no ribbon.
The whole body should wag off with the tail wagging. So when there is such specific mention of the temperament in all these breeds, why is it that it is in the high tones that most of the breeds don't have a specific mention on a temperament type?
Well, I don't know, and that has to do with the parent clubs, because the parent clubs rule over their standards.
Okay.
And it's very unfortunate, especially when you're dealing with standards that are nebulous. The Saluki standard in the United States is very nebulous.
Okay.
The thing that we have to remember is this. When we're looking at solving mysteries of breed type, we have to look at character. Character is temperament. For example, if I have an Oswald that is jumping up and licking my face and doing this, I would have to think, boy, this is really nice. However, is this actually what this guard dog does? No. It's a complete anomaly. Silhouette. It has to have the right silhouette. It has to have the correct head. It has to have the correct movement. It has to have the correct coat. When you start changing these things, then you take away from type. And if you don't mention temperament in a standard, therefore you have one less type characteristic to go on.
To evaluate us.
Could run into a problem later on.
So, on a conclusive note, can we say that shyness is not a quality of the Sighthorn group at all? It is something which is through breeding to the way the dog is socialized and raised. Maybe aloof is a character, maybe being a bit standoffish is a character, but shyness is not a character at all. Can we say that strongly?
For the Xi'an Hound?
For the overall Sighthorn group, I'm saying. Shyness as such is not the inherent character, is what I'm saying.
The characters are different. And you just have to know that. And sometimes you just have to sit around and get your hands on these dogs and know. But one thing that you must know with a lot of these Sighthounds too, is the fact that you cannot be heavy-handed with them.
Yeah, they're sensitive. You're right.
They're very, very sensitive. And once you start being heavy-handed, you can ruin the dog. I've seen judges go ahead and just, as if they're examining a mastiff or something like that, heavy-handed, which will destroy a Sighthound. And that, and I originally came from the Hound group, and I've just been approved for the whole toy group. And I've had many toy people, especially IG people, Chihuahua people say, wow, you are so light-handed with these dogs. Thank you very much. Well, I came from breeds that were very, as you said, sensitive. And you have to be sensitive to their character. And that's very most important. And another thing, too, is if these dogs are sensitive and you have no mention of temperament, then you're doing a disservice to the judge and to your dog.
I think that is a good cue. I think all of viewers should take that aspect in mind. You should be soft-handed with the Sighthounds. They are very sensitive dogs. That is how you raise them. It is not that you get to be hard with them. You're going to ruin the dog for eternity, per se. Great.
Right.
We've gone to the next one now.
Exactly. That's very, very important with the Sighthound. Very. And
okay, the next question. The next question is from Mr. Radhakrishnan again. Can you define the term Eastern expression used in the breed standard of the Afghan Hound?
Well, Eastern expression in the standard for the Afghan Hound, I think a lot of the expression has to do with the eye. And with the Afghan Hound, you have an almond eye, which is an element of Eastern expression, or what I like to call Orientalist expression. Mm-hmm. The Orientalist artists of the 1800s went to North Africa, looked at these dogs, and embedded in the Afghan Hound standard is like their look should be as if they're looking in ages past, and that defines an Eastern expression, and the eyes, so on and so forth. And also, you're not going to have that Eastern expression if you have an abrupt stop. So it's all, it's a whole incorporation of that headpiece.
Superb. I think that explains that very well. We'll go to the next one, Siddharth. So there is one from Mr. Drubajyoti. What should be the position and shape of the eyes in sight hounds as they hunt based on their sight? Can you please elaborate on the same?
Well, let me think about this one. This is not an easy one.
You take all the time, as you said, we have all the time to listen to you.
Well, let me start out by this. Most dogs have a total vision of 250 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Humans have about 120 degrees because our eyes are set directly in front of our heads. But a human's vision is only about 190 degrees, so therefore dogs have 60 degrees more than what we do. And that's very important because a key for sight hounds is having peripheral vision. That's very, very important. Another thing, too, is we have to look at dolichocephalic dogs have a wider field of vision, but smaller overlap between eyes and therefore possibly poorer depth perception.
Okay.
In some of their field of view than brachiocephalic dogs. But there's no scientific based evidence to confirm the popular belief that sighthounds have a higher visual acuity than other types of dogs. However, there's increasing evidence that dolichocephalic dogs, thanks to a higher number of retinal ganglion cells in their visual streak, retain more heightened sensitivity than other dog types to objects and rapid movements in the horizontal field of vision. Now, if we want to get even further with this, we'll take a look at some of the Eastern aspects of dogs from our other question and talk about shapes of eyes. The Ocelot, they should be almond-shaped and quite large. Not large being protruding, but there's no mention of spacing. Whereas you find in a lot of terrier breeds that there is in the standard talk about eyes far apart. Afghan hounds, almond-shaped eyes, no mention of spacing. Borzois, the eyes are set obliquely. They do mention somewhat about spacing. They say the corner midway between the tip of the nose and occiput should be the spacing of the eyes. Greyhounds, they have nothing about the size of the eye, nor the spacing at all, although the FCI says oval and obliquely, and I talked about the AKC standard first, but FCI says oval and obliquely, but nothing about spacing. Irish Wolfhounds, nothing about spacing. Just saying a little indentation between the eyes, nothing about the eye shape. So you have to be very careful on that one. Pharaoh Hound, they say oval. Salukis say oval, but I like them to be a little bit more Orientalist between perhaps an almond eye and a oval eye. Scottish Deerhound, they're moderately full, have to have a soft look. Slugie, oval to almond. Interesting. I like to see with Salukis, oval to almond. but it doesn't say that in their standard. But the Slugy has oval to almond. It's just the way standards are written. And the Whippet says almond, round, large, oval, and shape. Or excuse me, round, large, oval, and shape. Scratch the almond. And they say that they should be, in Sluggies, they should be wide set in their size, so on and so forth. But, nothing transfers a lot from one standard to another. You just have to be cognizant of the fact of how they are supposed to look. If, for example, if I saw a Saluki with big round eyes, and one of my characteristics of breeds are the head, and the eyes are part of the head, that lacks type.
True.
So you just have to know these little nuances in the breed.
Every specific breed and the nuances. You're right.
Yes. That's very, very important, because in the Doberman standard, they should be almond. And
it changes the whole breed type as such. We go to the next one. The next one is that? Okay. It's again from the same gentleman, Mr. Drubajyoti. He says, AKC standard of the Whippet breed allows for a slightly taller animal than the FCI. Please comment on why such a distinction has been observed.
Well, I don't really know. But the problem here is, what the parent club writes, and I have to judge in the United States according to the AKC standard, and I have to judge when I'm in Europe the FCI standard. But I want to talk a little bit about these slightly taller animals in the FCI and so on and so forth. I've judged Whippets a lot in Europe, and they think, uh-oh, here comes this American judge, so we can pull out our big dogs. Because there are some Whippets that are big in Europe as well. And I think a lot of it has to do with imports, so on and so forth. The FCI standard says that dogs should be between 18.5 inches to 20 inches. Bitches should be 17.5 to 18.5 inches. And there are no disqualifications in the FCI standard. So a dog at 23, 24 inches can walk in. Correct?
True.
Yes.
As long as the balance is there.
Okay, then the AKC standard says the ideal height for a Whippet dog should be 19 to 22 inches. So we're looking at, on the lower side, a difference of 1/2 inch.
True.
On the higher side, we're looking at a difference of 2 inches.
True.
So, to me, that's slightly taller. However, in the American standard for dogs, if they're over 22.5 inches, it's a disqualification.
Okay.
So there, you say goodbye, so sorry. And this is something else I'm going to go into afterwards too. For the bitches, the American standard says the ideal height is 18 to 21 inches. Now here's where we have a variability. On the lower side, we have a difference of 1/2 inch. On the higher side, we have a difference of 2.5 inches. And the DQ says, the disqualification, 21.5 inches, we have to say goodbye to the bitch in the ring. And, I have a problem. And that in the American Kennel Club, and I'm not saying anything against FCI because I love FCI. I've judged a lot of FCI shows. I respect their system, but there are things that I don't understand. And that is their measuring technique.
Okay.
In the United States, we are instructed on a whole protocol on how to measure a dog. In Europe, I see the judges take out this, In French, they call it une toise, and they hold it up against the dog like that. Well, if we did that in the United States, we would have that breed taken away from us because we have a whole series and set of ways on how to measure a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to respect this. And we have to show we use a wicket. And we have to show on each one of the legs of the wicket that with a tape measure to the exhibitor on a flat surface, exactly does it match up? Is it at 21 and a half? Is it at 22 and a half? And the exhibitor approves it by looking at it. Then we have a whole way that we have to, the highest point of the withers, we set the wicket, and we measure the dog either in or out. We don't have a systematic way in FCI to do this. So someone come along and say, well, you're wrong. Well, I took out my measuring stick and that, but there's no protocol. There's no set protocol, and that must be done because some exhibitors may be so upset that they could possibly take the judge to court. And this is the reason why the AKC has done what they've done, and they make their judges not only pass a measurement test, but a weighing test as well.
Okay.
So
that's great. That's
when we're talking about whippets and measuring, we have to be very, very careful. And we don't, 2 inches, 3 inches, it's not huge.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the thing to keep in mind. If a whippet walks into the ring and looks like another breed, go the other way.
True.
And that's with any other breed as well.
True. That, I think, answers Mr. Drubajyoti's question. We'll move on to the next one, Siddharth. So there's one from Mr. Dinkar Pratap Singh. He says, Sight-hounds are not one of the most popular breeds as pets. So hence there's a limited gene pool available to breeders. And does this lead to more health issues?
Well, I don't think that's completely true. The world's a small place right now. You can get semen sent. You do have an availability of gene pools. I can remember years ago, it's the first time I ever judged the French national, the Chateau someplace in France. I want to say Prunois. I'm not quite familiar or don't remember. But I saw a smooth Saluki.
Mm-hmm.
Took my breath away. And I said, I need to get something like this. The next year I went back to France and I hunted that dog down. Able to convince the owners to let me bring him back to the United States and to use him for breeding. So we have an availability of movement and we have the availability of shipping. Of course, with COVID-19, it might be a little bit interrupted here, but we do have a gene pool out there. And I can't say it is completely limited. Perhaps with some very rare breeds, yes, it is limited. However, there's always a place to go.
Okay, I think Mr. Dinkar's question also stems from the fact that in India, we have a lot of restriction in terms of importing dogs, importing semen. It's only very recently that the Kennel Club of India has authorized and approved the use of artificial insemination as a method.
And that's wonderful. And when I was in Chennai judging, there was a wonderful vet that came in. I think she was the head of the Reproductive Institute. And
yes,
her
Dr.
talk
Sridevi
was stellar. It was excellent.
Yes, very true. I think she is all. We have got AI approved now, and I think with expert support like one of Dr. Sridevi and others, we think we should be able to bring better success in our breeding programs, bring in better gene pool into the country. So wish us luck for that. Great. We'll go to the next one. Okay, there's one from Mr. Manjunath MR. He says, could you please shed some light on the lure coursing events, which is only limited to sight-hounds?
Basically, yes. In the United States, I can give you a list of breeds that are recognized for the coursing championship.
Mhm.
And those are Afghans, Oswak, Basenji, Borzoi, Chinekal de Letna, Greyhound, Abethan Hound, Irish Wolfhound, Italian Greyhound, Pharaoh Hound, Portuguese Podenco Pequeño, Rhodesian Ridgeback, Saluki, Scottish Deerhound, Slugie, and Whippet. They are allowed to get the coursing title. Now, there are some breeds in the miscellaneous and foundation stock service breeds, like the Norbotten Spitz, Peruvian Inca Orchid, Portuguese Podenco, Thai Ridgeback, and I think these are the breeds in your group 5 that can get these dog breeds are recorded with a purebred alternative listing program, or dogs with conditional registration are eligible to participate. So they can participate, but they can't get the lure coursing championship title.
Okay. I think that was also one of the questions. He was asking, Manjunath again asked a question of whether they would be dogs other than the sight-ons would be eligible to pick up the CACIL, which you're talking about as the lure coursing title from the FCI, which you're clarifying that they will not be able to.
FCI in coursing, and you have to understand, I did not course my dogs myself. People asked me, can I take your dog to course? And I would allow them to do that.
Okay.
Also, I imported a Saluki, her name is Canel, to France, and the owner took her to many coursing events, and one big coursing event in Switzerland, she became a European champion. So, as far as coursing is concerned, I don't know much about it, although I know certain things about it. There's different levels of competition. The AKC Hounds are judged for overall ability, follow of the lure, speed, agility, and endurance for a maximum score of 50 points. Each one of those are 10 points apiece. FCI, dogs are judged according to the FCI regulations for international lure coursing competitions. Lure coursing judges judge the performance of the dog on the basis of the following 5 criteria, which is like AKC's, but they are granted 20 points apiece, so they're looking at 100. You have at international lure coursing trials, the CACIL, which is a certificat d'aptitude au championnat international des courses de lévrier, which is the acronym, is given first place sight-hound of each breed and sex, provided that it's achieved at least 2/3 of the possible total points. Now, sanctioning organizations, eligible breeds to course in the FCI are the Afghan Hound, Oswak, Boers, Charkpolski, Deerhound, Galgo, Espanol, Greyhound, Irish Wolfhound, Italian Greyhound, Bagar Agar, Saluki, Slugi, and Whippet. So we allow Rhodesian Ridgebacks and AKC and some other dogs too. And then one thing about the Americans, the other breeds can also compete for, it's called a CAT, which is basically a certificate that they have an aptitude that they like to course.
Okay, fair.
So it's that. But the following FCI breeds in Group 5, the primitive type, and we're talking about FCI, are also allowed to participate. They can gain most national titles.
Okay.
And take part in the European Lure Coursing Championship trial. However, they can currently not get the CACIL. And these breeds are the Chernakal de Letna, Pharaoh Hound, Podenco Canario, Podenko i Bisenko. And also, Basinjis, Podenko, Portuguese, they participate on a national level in some European countries, but they're not currently eligible for FCI international lure coursing trials. But for the people in India, what I say is, if you've got a sighthound, course them. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And this is what they love to do.
We would really love to do that, but I think most of my Indian counterparts would agree. We are always short of land space to really let them go and go behind.
We have a lot of space in India that you can do that, which is wonderful.
That would be really great if we have that. We look forward to it. Fine, Siddharth. Next question. So there's one from Mr. Radhakrishnan again. Can you talk about SARD, sudden acquired retinal degeneration, testing in sighthounds?
Yes, and at my particular kennel club, on one of the days we test for that. We have an eye doctor that comes in and does that for us. And unfortunately, a lot of things creep up in sighthounds. The main thing that we worry about is heart defects, heart disease, abnormalities in the heart, and that. But retinal degeneration, basically because of age or early onset, can happen. I haven't had it happen with my dogs, but I've heard of it in other dogs as well. Something that should be tested, because if it's a carrier, you certainly don't want to breed that dog, because we have to be responsible for their health. And again, like I told you before, we are always responsible for what we tame.
So you mean to say that for SARD, there is a definitive test which would give us whether it is a clear dog or whether it is a carrier or affected, correct?
Well, it depends on the breeder. If you breed a carrier to a non-carrier, chances are you're not going to get that problem. However, if you breed down the line, it could come up again. So you have to be prudent, and you have to think about what is best for the dog, and for the generations of the dog, because health is a prime breeding aspect, and you have to adhere to that.
Makes a lot of sense. I think they will take the right lessons out of it. We'll go to the next one. So there's again one from Mr. Durbajyoti. He says, is a slight break in the top lane of a whippet acceptable or desirable?
Yeah, well, no. I don't like a slight break in the top line of a whippet. And let me just find this. I had something on the whippet in particular. I do. The thing is that in the whippet standard, in the AKC standard, says the back line runs smoothly from the withers with a graceful natural arch, not too accentuated, over the loin, and carry through over the croup. I don't see anything about a break in the top line. But the thing that you have to remember about a whippet is that the outline of the whippet is arguably its most important and distinctive feature. And if I have breaks, then I think, well, I'm not looking at a one-piece dog, I'm looking at a two-piece dog. I don't like that. I want a nice composite picture. And there was another question that you had, I think, about what happens if a whippet has an extreme rear angulation?
Yes, I think that will come up next.
Well, then, again, going back to what Richard Beauchamp, the author of the book Solving the Mystery, silhouette is very important, because the silhouette is not right, it loses type. And if it's over-angulated in the rear, chances are the front is not going to be able to take the rear propulsion. So it's going to affect the movement. And with whippets, you want a nice low reach, and you're not going to get that. Sometimes you're going to get what we call, and we see this in whippets a lot, an egg beater front. And with that egg beater front, it means that it can't take the propulsion from the rear. Therefore, the whole composite picture of the whippet can't have anything really extreme in it. No brakes, no huge angulation in the rear. It's just not right.
No exaggeration passage.
Mm-hmm.
We go on to the next one, Siddharth. So one more from Mr. Radhakrishnan. One thing I see in common on side tone standard is straight shoulder placement. How serious is the 45-degree angle placement in a hound, as is recommended in working group?
Well, if the standard doesn't call for it, it shouldn't have it. And what we have in a lot of the majority of the hounds is what we call open angulation. The angulation is going to be much more than the 45-degree angle that a lot of breeds, and especially working breeds, call for. Doberman, for example, 45-degree front, 45-degree rear.
Yeah.
Can't have it. Can you imagine if I had a 45-degree angle in an Oswak? It wouldn't work because it would affect the movement. Again, the movement is one of the 5 characteristics of breed type. And it changed the movement of the dog completely. It changes the silhouette of the dog completely. And they would no longer be what I term the dancers of the desert. Because really, Oswak and their movement, if you're taking a look at it, is basically a ballet dancer. Have you ever seen a ballet dancer that was fat?
Makes sense.
Right, exactly. So it's going to change the movement. Another thing, hounds aren't supposed to have the very marked, and I'm talking about sight hounds, 45-degree angle. They're supposed to have more open angulation. Now, with that, they can move just fine. They can hunt just fine. Can we go to that video? I want to show you a video of a sloogie. Take a look at the front angulation of that sloogie. And I want to ask everybody that's looking at it, the fact that, do you find it's impeding its function?
Okay, we have a quick YouTube video to share. There we go.
This is poetry in motion.
Rare is the sloogie who knows how to catch
And look at that eye. That is a very, very orientalistic eye. And
who knows
if you can go back to the, I don't know if you can, but if you take a look at the contour of that Arab man's eye, and take a look at the contour of that Saluki, it is almost 100% the same, because these hounds follow their culture. They're a mirror of their culture. And this is a preservation technique. See?
Yeah, makes a lot of connection there.
Very interesting. Okay. There we go. That's all we need to see on that one.
Thank
But
you.
you can see that that dog is not a 45-degree angle. It's an open angulation, and most sighthounds have that open angulation. What the problem is in these sighthounds are a straight upper arm. And that is wrong because that will impede movement.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to the next one. David. Okay, this is a bit of a long question. It is said that hounds like Irish Wolfhounds, Scottish Greyhounds, etc., and even Great Danes for that matter, descended from a common hunting dog. So why aren't Great Danes classified as sighthounds? They again, hunt by sight, isn't it?
Well, I am not any big expert on Great Danes. And the thing is, when I judge in Australia and I do the non-sporting group, the Great Danes in the non-sporting group. In fact, the first time that happened to me, I had about, I'd say 20 Great Danes I had to judge. And I went to the steward and I said, I'm not approved to judge Great Danes in the United States. They said, since you have enough breeds in the non-sporting group, you can judge them here. So I'll tell you what I know about Great Danes. That they come from a different breeding stock. And they basically came from Mastiffs or Molossoid dogs.
Okay.
Molossan Hounds, Molossan Hounds basically originated in Greece, and a breed or a large type of dog that are ancient. And for example, that's the difference there, because I don't believe that sighthounds are derived from this type of dog. Yes, they are dolocephalic dogs. However, sighthounds, and in particular with Great Danes, have a strongly pronounced stop.
Okay.
And we don't have that in sighthounds. And they call for a rectangular head in the Great Dane standard. And the problem is that in no sighthound standard that we have calls for a rectangular head. Again, taking a look at angulation, Great Dane's angulation, they want as near as possible to a right angle.
True.
However, we don't have that in hounds. So that's a big difference right there. And again, we saw that video of that dog and taking a look at its top line chasing the hare in the desert. The top line of a Dane should be completely level. And we don't have any arch over the loin. All it says, I think, in the Great Dane standard is the loin is broad. So therefore, I don't think Danes move like sighthounds or are as agile as sighthounds. So, those are the big differences. Whereas they can't be classified as sighthounds because they don't have the characteristics.
Super. Great. We'll go to the next one.
Okay.
So there's one from Mr. Rubajyoti again. So how important is aerodynamic construction and body in a sighthound? As you all see they have it.
No, I think it's very important. And I think the way that they keep their heads and so on and so forth, so many times that when we show sighthounds and dogs in particular, we want their heads to be way up and so on and so forth. But usually when they're running, they have their heads down lower. So that adds to the aerodynamic effect of the dog when it's working. It's very important that we have an aerodynamic body because we don't want anything to impede that. One of the reasons for sighthounds that we don't have abrupt stops. We have, a gradual stop or non-perceptible stops. That's another aerodynamic feature of the sighthound.
Okay. We'll go to the next one.
Okay.
So there's one from Dinkar and Nirne again. They ask about who's an ideal owner And what is an ideal home environment for a Sighton? Are they suitable in apartments as pets?
No, they're not suitable for an apartment. Although there are some people that have greyhounds that live in an apartment and greyhounds, because of their character, even though it's not in the standard, they're a little bit docile dogs. But they shouldn't be kept in an apartment. I think one of the major things I ask people about when they would come and look at the dogs and would want a dog, do you have a fenced-in backyard? That was one of the things. I said, can you give the dog enough socialization? Are you going to be attentive to the dog? Do you have a vet that you can trust? Because I can remember at the time that I was entering into Sighthounds, a lot of vets were killing Sighthounds because they didn't understand the fact that they couldn't absorb the anesthetic. So basically, it was the breeders who taught a lot of the vets and alerted a lot of the vets on the susceptibility of Sighthounds with anesthetic. Knowing what to feed was another thing too that I would look at and basically counsel them on. But an ideal owner would have enough time to socialize, take the dog out, go coursing, so on and so forth, and really get involved in the sport. Or if they had just a pet, just to be able to love the animal and to know that dogs are for life. This is so very important. So very important. I can remember the same lady who put the nice coursing championship on the Saluki that I imported to her. The dog, unfortunately, got cancer down the line when it was older and passed away. And they wanted another Saluki really bad. And I flew with the dog to Paris and gave them a dog in Paris. And they were living at that time, not in France, but in Morocco. But they met me at the French train station and took the dog. And the dog didn't work out.
Okay.
Well, my responsibility as a breeder is that I must save that dog. So therefore, I flew back to Paris, picked up the dog, and flew back home with it. And she lived here with me and her brother until the day they died.
That is really nice.
This is another reason too, and I see a lot of people breeding quite a bit. I never bred profusely. I never bred a lot of litters because I would breed maybe once every 3 years because I needed to follow the puppies and I needed to be responsible. And I think this is, for Sighthounds, very, very important because there are not a lot of people knocking at the door wanting these dogs.
True. Wonderful. So I think that answers Dinkaran in a question. So we have the last but one question from Mr. Radhakrishnan. With greyhounds becoming synonymous with racing, have they been bred away from the original standard of the Sighton?
Well, I've seen some racing greyhounds that look like greyhounds, and I've seen some that look a little bit different. You take a look at the greyhound standard, you take a look at the Saluki standard, they're not really verbose. They're not telling us exactly a lot of information. We just have to innately know what they're supposed to look like. The Saluki standard I'll talk to about is very nebulous. You almost have to grow up with Salukis to really understand them.
Okay.
We have a problem with this with other breeds too. When you're looking at the sporting group breeds and you're looking at field trial dogs compared to dogs that are being shown.
Sure, in the confirmation room. You're right.
They're two different animals.
True.
And the dog show people tend to look at like, well, they don't fit the picture of what this particular breed should look like. But the field trial people say, well, they're doing what they're supposed to do. So, these are two different worlds. And again, with the Greyhound, these are two different worlds too. They're trying to breed a dog that's going to be immensely swift and to be able to win. And if they don't win, unfortunately, sometimes they're put down. And it's really a big, bad situation with Greyhounds. This is why we have many rescue Greyhound groups.
As you rightly said, there's a huge rescue greyhound groups which is in action because of all this abuse and neglect that the breed goes through.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, David. We'll go to the last question, where I will also ask you something additional to it. There is one from Mr. CV. So he's asking, you have judged in India. So what is your impression about the sight-hounds in India?
I think I may have shared this with CV when I judged in Chennai, and it's a show that I believe that was beautifully set, very nicely done, and is the fact that when I judged the Indian Sighthounds, when I looked in that ring, I thought, I am looking at the past. And I was mesmerized by this because they were what I believed would have been in a caravan, would have been years ago, and that I was touching history. And I think that was very, very moving.
Wonderful. I have one question for you from my end, David, on this subject on Indian sight-hounds. Which breed do you think will have a good chance of getting recognized in the first place? Because it's a huge aspiration for us, for all Indians, that one of our dogs get international recognition with the FCI. So which breed? You have seen the Mudols, you've seen the Rajabalyams, and you've seen the Caravans, Rampur. I don't want to name any specific dog. So which one do you think have a best chance?
You must understand that this is my personal preference.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking for.
I like the Rajapalyam.
Okay.
And I think they're very, very old breed to India. And I think they must be protected. I like the Moodle Hound, Caravan Hound, because I think that they have a tremendous rich history. Owned a lot in India by people with very little means, way out in the countryside. And through their aspirations, they have been kept pure, but there are other people entering the picture too that are breeding other breeds into them. And I think you need India, and the Indian Kennel Club needs to rein in these pure specimens and to watch over them. Because if you don't do it now, you won't have them later. It's very important because this is part of your history, and it's a very significant history to sighthounds. And I'm surprised that in India that there's not a bigger sort of population of sighthounds in your show, because your country has some of the best indigenous sighthounds in the world, and they have to be protected. And I know there are other people that I had a young man that interested in coursing, and he was also at the Shanghai World Dog Show when I judged the World Dog Show in China. Manjunath?
Manjunath. Should be
Yes,
Mr. Manjunath.
my pronunciation is so very bad. That really was very adept at what he did, and I think he has a true vision in the way of looking at perhaps the caravan hound and other Indian sight hounds that they need to be protected, and it has to start now. And I know CV does a beautiful magazine.
We have the Indian Kennel Gazette.
Yeah, the Indian Kennel Gazette that has talked about Indian sight hounds and so on and so forth. So I think this needs to be reined in. And from what I understand there's an individual in India now protecting some of the sight hounds and trying to get them into FCI. And I think it's very, very important. You need to do that. That has to be done. And a concerted effort needs to be followed to do it. And of course, it's not these poor people out in the countryside that can do this. It's the intelligentsia of India, the intelligentsia of the Indian Kennel Club, and the responsibility to your country and heritage to get this done and get it done now.
Sure, David.
I hope I didn't disturb you.
No, we really wanted to understand your view on it, and we will surely take that message to our heart and we'll work towards it. Thanks a lot. I think we had an interactive, wonderful session. Our session was for actually 1 hour, and it's spilled over to 1 hour and 35 minutes. So thanks again, David.
Listen, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you to the viewers, no matter where you're at. Thank you for listening to me. Remember, these are just my comments, my views on these after over 40 years of being in sight hounds and dogs. I want to thank the Indian Kennel Club for doing this. This is wonderful. You have a lot of great dog people, yourself, and Manuth, and you have Stevie, who is a wonderful organizer. You have other Indian judges that I have seen judge that, I can remember meeting CV near the Westminster weekend many years ago, watching him do pugs. Philip John, an institution.
True.
And there's another judge that I feel that it needs some recognition, and I need to mention his name, and correct me when I pronounce it, is Mukul Vaid.
Mr. Mukul Vaid.
Yes, excellent judge. I judged with him in, where was it? In Fortaleza, Brazil. And I had such a wonderful perception of his judging that really left a mark on me. So, but I thank all of you for watching, and let's keep on with the sight hounds. They're great.
Sure, that's one of the reasons, because we wanted to popularize them too. I think as a country, we are not too focused on sight hounds, and most of our indigenous breeds are sight hounds. So it is high time we start focusing on them. Thanks a lot, David. Thanks, viewers. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe, stay home with this current pandemic crisis. We will come back again next weekend with an interesting session with one of the breed experts.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Namaste. Thank
Namaste.
you.